you very much for making time on a Saturday to being with us. I am with me here is my good friend Mohammed. Mohammed, say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
And
Hope
then,
you're all doing good, and thanks very much for joining.
yes, indeed. Thank you so very much for making time. So we are going to have some fun with Microsoft technology. Essentially, we're going to look at Teams. We're going to look at Power Platform, essentially Power Apps there, and then the integration with WhatsApp. Time permitting, we also perhaps will look at the IoT component maybe, but we'll actually see how we go. Because there's a fair bit to actually cover just with this integration, the integration between WhatsApp, Teams to Power Apps, and Power Apps to WhatsApp. So just that scenario will take some time. Then, folks, as a quick introduction, I am a Microsoft enthusiast, tech enthusiast, and a community member. I've been exposed to community for about 4 or 5 years right now. My claim to fame is I was with Microsoft for 10 years. So during which, unfortunately, I wasn't connected with the community. It was like heads down with work at Microsoft. But once I got out, oh my God, it is so fantastic, being with the community. There is so much opportunity to actually be with like-minded people, learn from you. As I'm learning from Mohammed, his posts are absolutely fantastic. I can just follow through and then get whatever I have to get out of it. So I've learned so much. And then the second thing from a giving back standpoint, events such as this actually provide us an opportunity to just share. We are at the end of the day just merely enthusiasts like trying to share. We take away knowledge and we apply it professionally as well, right? So that's the summary of it. Along the way, we actually get certified. But then I'm sure you folks are all, fairly senior, how do you say, consultants, so on and so forth. Certifications, they're important, but I suppose, the real thing is how we actually help people, especially if we are on the tech side, end users, if you are on the, user side, be it either, in engineering, other sides of, engineering, or actually on the business side when it comes to finance, HR, so on and so forth. We go through so much, we go through so much, and then oftentimes clunky applications can really drag us down. So it's a great opportunity to actually learn and make our lives actually better, right? And then enjoy the ride. For God's sakes, enjoy the ride. It's not just about doing work, right? So with that in mind, what we did was Mohammed and I said, hey, look, why don't there are so many groups out here and they're all focused on some aspect of, Microsoft technology or otherwise, it could be Power Platform, it could be Teams or like aspects of Office 365, security, so on and so forth. We said, let us actually focus just on pure user delight, whatever that means, right? I mean, it could be anything, any technology from Microsoft that we integrate and just enjoy, So kindly scan, there is a QR code there. It would be extremely kind if you could scan that and then we form a little group. By no means, we initially try to get everybody together. But then what we hope is that just the same way we are doing a jam session today, tomorrow you guys come in and then you present, right? Something that is passionate, that you're passionate about, that we can actually learn from. So that's the end goal of this user delight with Microsoft Cloud. So we are not claiming, Dynamics 365 or Microsoft 365 or Cosmos database, none of that, right? We just want to have some fun. So, if you want to join, kindly do. It would be a privilege to have you. And then it's open, free and open to everybody. One of the side benefits I've gotten as an example is making effective presentations. That's more on the professional side. So many benefits to being part of such groups, okay? With that, what we'll do here is, Mohammed, do you want to say a couple things before we dive right into the content?
Sure, Sanjeev. Yeah. So as Sanjeev said, I met him through LinkedIn, and a year back, it's almost close a year, and I've got inspired with the IoT things which he does, right? So, and after that, I've learned IoT, right, and how it actually works and how to control devices from the Power Apps with the help of Raspberry Pi and stuff like that. So that is the power of community. You get inspired and then you learn it. So yeah, that is how I started my community work. And part of that, I also do blogging, and this is my blog site, ashikef.com. I do write a lot of blogs about Power Platform and also IoT. So if you get a chance, do take a look at it. And this is my LinkedIn QR code. If you want to be connected with me, do connect. And as Sanjeev said, so this is the group which he has just talked about, the User Delight with Microsoft Cloud. And if you want to get a member, please do. Yeah, so that's it. That is it from me, Sanjeev.
Wonderful, wonderful, Mo. So, folks, with this as like a preamble, right? Let us dive right into it. So, before we get into the components of the scenario, what we'd like to do is just walk you through first the scenario we're talking about, right? And perhaps, Mo, I mean, you could share. I think I got my WhatsApp back as well.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
could share as well. Kindly let me know whichever way, right? Um,
yeah. I have
so,
my WhatsApp ready.
or and Yeah, let's go to the poll. So, folks, what we have as a scenario over here is basically a field service kind of a scenario, right? I'm in Singapore. Mohammed is actually in Sweden. I mean, sorry, Norway, right? So, in portions of how do you say the developed world, this could be a fairly common scenario where we actually see, we are in a condo as an example. So let us say there is an issue with plumbing, or you're in an office, let us say, and then there's an issue with lighting or the AC units or something like that. The scenario is today after something actually happens, after let us say something like goes wrong, then you actually call the service company. They actually take down your whatever the issue is, create a ticket, so on and so forth, and then actually send somebody is saying something. 1 second, let me just check. Is this I can't hear anything from my side. Folks, if everyone can hear, kindly raise your hand, please. If everyone can hear, one of you. Yeah, okay. So, folks, it looks like it may be an issue. It may be an issue, Mr. Mulapo. It may be an issue on your side. Kindly actually, how do you say, check your device settings, or how do you say, log back in, sir. Kindly log out and log back in because other folks are able to hear. Okay. So the scenario here is that we have an issue, we raise the ticket, then the service company actually does whatever management they have to do on their end, and then provisions people to actually come in, technicians to come in and check the issue out. That's the typical process, right? But here, what we're talking about is two things. One is, how do you actually proactively engage with the company, either through the device actually providing information back to the services company because the architecture has been made like so, or the other scenario is that from typical communications that we actually see. So I'm like literally in my office, I look up, I see that potentially there could be an issue because I hear some kind of a buzz or whatever. So it may not have actually reached the threshold of the system breaking down, but nonetheless, I actually hear some noise, right? So what I want to do is I want to get ahead of this, and then I have the number, the WhatsApp number to the services company, right? People do that, right? They say, hey, WhatsApp us, and so on and so forth. So as an example over here, the tax agency, IRAS, right? So I can actually WhatsApp with them, or like citizen services with the government, we can actually WhatsApp them, right? So something very similar on the small and medium business side, where they may not have the whole shebang of Dynamics 365 connected field service with Azure and all that. That could be a pricey solution for, let us say, condo management as an example. These are not your big, huge agencies with deep pockets. These are small people, right? So for these guys, what we could do is on WhatsApp, they WhatsApp a services company, right? Which is exactly what we are looking at in front here. Contoso Customer Care, as an example, is a provider that actually provides, whatever AC repair or fans or plumbing or whatever it is, so that's what they provide. So what we'll do, what Mohammed will do here is he will actually type up a message saying, hey, look, greetings, we have an issue with lighting on the floor. We need some urgent help in, how do you say, getting this fixed. Or we could even say that, it looks like, we saw a flicker So we would like to get ahead of this, and can you help us out, right? So this is what he's going to message to the company, which is Contoso Customer Care, right? So once this happens, well, I am actually now part of the customer service team, and I'm an engineer. I'm a full-blown engineer. So then what I notice over here is that I get a, how do you say, a note from Mohammed here saying, please look at this, right? Mohammed, is that, it's,
Yeah.
right? So
So
this is actually like, how do you say, if he full screens the, yeah. So basically this issue has now come to me. I'm a customer service agent. I'm an engineer as well. I know the mechanical or electrical components of this. So that issue has come to me. So as soon as this actually comes to me, I receive it on what is called as adaptive card. It's literally a card on Microsoft Teams in a particular channel, right? So customer care is a team, and we've got a bunch of people on the teams. I get a card like this saying there is an issue, right? So as soon as this actually comes in, first thing, a case has automatically actually been registered. And if Mohammed, if you could kindly go back to WhatsApp, the case is actually registered and it is sent back to the the person, Mohammed in this case, saying, hey, here is your case. We have registered, we have acknowledged this, your issue, and here is the case, right? So that's the first step. Now, as you can see on the Teams component over here, this is coming to Teams directly from WhatsApp, right? And it's actually coming to what's called as an adaptive card. Now, for me professionally, I don't typically work on the Teams side or on the adaptive card side. I work on the Power Platform side or the Powerapps side. But Mohammed does. He lives actually, Microsoft 365 for a living. Mohammed, do you want to take a couple minutes and just talk about what you use adaptive cards for in general?
absolutely, sir. So it is a platform agnostic component, which has where you can have and design your own user interface with the help of an adaptive card designer. And as I said, it is platform agnostic. So you design a card for Teams. It can be even used in Outlook. It can be used in a Cortana bot or an Azure bot. You can use it everywhere. One single snippet of code, the JSON code, which can be used across different platforms, right? And moreover, this is just a scenario where I have put in designed an adaptive card which can be posted on a Teams channel. The same adaptive card can also even be put on Outlook, so that the customer support engineer, they receive the card in Outlook, they can take actions like what we are going to be doing right now. Yeah.
Gotcha. And Mohammed, could you talk also about like scenarios that you've actually used this for? I mean, I can think
Okay.
of like a bunch of scenarios,
Yeah,
Could you? Yeah.
absolutely. So the scenarios, recently I have worked for a customer. So we have got a SharePoint site, and whenever you create a page or a news article in SharePoint, the
Yeah.
user doesn't get notified, right? So unless you have got a SharePoint app, you get notified. There is a push notification there. So what we have done is, as
Yeah.
and when there is a news article or a page is created, we had a flow, a Microsoft
Mhm.
Power Automate flow, that actually picks up the news content. It posts an adaptive cut, like whatever
Gotcha.
image that the user has been using, that particular image, the title, etc., and it gets posted on on a Teams channel, so that the user are push notified as well. So this is one
Beautiful.
of the scenario, and also I have used it for a couple of other scenario as well, Sanjeev. For example, approvals,
Yes.
right? User
Yes.
approving it. Yeah, yeah,
Yes. So, I mean, approvals are classic, right? Be it either, procurement flow, which is so classic. You could have finance, forecasting, budgeting, something like that, where you want your manager to actually approve your forecast. So that's another classic thing. HR, right? Leave management, so on, and benefits, so on and so forth. So all of these can actually, all these scenarios can actually get into, you could use this adaptive cards for that. Now, you can do the same thing with your Power Automate and then actually send approvals to either Outlook. Endpoints can be many, right? Either
yeah.
Outlook, or you can actually approve right within Power Automate or wherever else, So there are many different options. The beauty of doing this on Teams is that from an end user perspective, and especially with senior leaders, they're always on their teams, be it either on meetings or whatever, especially with COVID-19, people are always on their teams. This really actually helps because it comes directly to your place. And then as an example here, me as a customer service agent, I've got this issue, right? Now, what I could technically do is I could actually go on another team and say, hey, look, somebody is talking about this lighting issue. That maybe another person, I'm an engineer who's actually like, let us say, good with AC units, right? So then I could actually just text somebody who's actually in lighting and get some, how do you say, help and so on and so forth. So that's the beauty of actually centralizing it within Teams, right? But once we are actually on Teams, now I could do two things, right? One is resolution, but in resolution, I'm far away. We need to first understand what the case is. So here, I'll actually click on view case, right? So if I want to know the details of the case, right? So then this takes me over to my Powerapps, which is a full-blown app actually that is built right into my Teams, right? What I mean is this is not, so you can build Powerapps in two ways. One is you can actually go right royally to the Power Apps Studio, and then you can build your Canvas application over there, right? So that's one way. Another way is you could actually build Power Apps inside of Teams, but that is more of a, how do you say, a day-to-day smaller kind of scenario. We are talking about the full-blown Power Apps being designed in the Canvas and then embedded here with a click of a button inside of your gallery, right? So this here from Power Apps now, there is a deep integration right into, from Teams, there's a deep integration into Power Apps. So with a click of a button, I can actually see the case that I've been assigned, right? Where, there's a problem. Now, what I could do here, and this we have kept it simple, we can have all kinds of workflows over here, I mean, I do like, apps for procurement, for finance, for field service, so on and so forth. The reason why I like Power Apps Canvas applications is that I can make it bespoke, right? You can make it as pretty as you want with the business process flow, be it either you combine it with the regular business process flow or you actually do instant and automated flow or desktop flows. When you combine it with all these, you get a very robust process, if you will, right? So the beauty is the front end is yours. It's as beautiful as you can make it, like a Japanese bento box, if you will, is a classic example. You feel then like using the app when it's actually like designed, well. I mean, here by no means is this actually pretty or whatever, but you can make it your own is the point. So once it's directly integrated with the issue, I can actually assign a technician. It says select a technician over there. Let us say I actually select Dingabor Engelfine or myself, right? Whoever, right? So then I assign the technician and immediately I get, you see, the customer name is logged and then the case number and then who the technician actually is, right? So once the technician actually is assigned, so if you go to the LinkedIn scenario as an example, perhaps we'll show that later, is that the technician now who's in the field, right? So let us say the person is in some other city in Norway, or I'm sitting in here in Newton in Singapore. Let us say the technician's actually in Novena. He gets a ping on either Teams or Power Apps itself, and the person actually comes over to the condo. Then the person goes over to the actual place where the issue is, right? Let us say it's a circuit board. There is an issue in the circuit board. He's staring at the circuit board or she's staring at the circuit board and unfortunately doesn't know what to do, right? Doesn't know what to do because there is no standard. In this specific case, there is no standard. So the person doesn't know what to connect. There are a couple wires like, that are free. And the last thing that the person wants to do is make an improper connection and blow the whole fuse out. So then what we could do is in that scenario, and this is a simpler scenario, there is a more complex scenario with HoloLens, okay? But in this scenario, what we could do is Mohammed could share his screen, literally, because we are on Teams, right? He can share his screen. He can show me the printed circuit board. Like literally, he can show me, like, your typical example would be Raspberry Pi. So Mohammed, if you open up your web, right? If you open up your web, you just go to like, Raspberry Pi pinout as an example, right? You just go to Raspberry Pi pinout. Right. So, he's showing me this one and he's basically saying, hey, look, you see that pin 19 over there. Can you actually connect this? I mean, I'm just making an example, So he could do that. He could just show it to me. You see, he can just point it. And if you have HoloLens, you can superimpose this on the actual, how do you say, print circuit board that I'm literally seeing. That's the advantage of using HoloLens. But in this simple scenario, and considering that this is for smaller businesses and small to medium businesses who may not have the wherewithal to buy all the goodies, then I just look at the printed circuit board, I look at what Mohammed is like doing over here, and I make the connection, right? Voila, the whole system is actually up and going. And then I tell Mohammed, since we are on Teams anyway, I tell Mohammed, hey, everything looks hunky-dory, like, kindly message back to, how do you say, the customer, right? So Mohammed, if you go back to your Teams right now, right? So there is this option for us to resolve the case, because me as a technician, I've talked to him, everything looks good. We have tested it, right? So then, let us assume that the customer has actually provided us access, because the condo management has got the keys and they've provided us access or something like that. The customer is traveling somewhere. So then what we could do is Mohammed could actually input a message over here where it says text input. He could actually say, your case has actually been resolved, right? You're all set, and then, click a button, right? Or even the office scenario, to the office manager or something like that. So he presses a button over there, and now there is this integration between Powerapps and WhatsApp. And then you get a message, as a customer, Mohammed is the customer, he gets a message from me saying your case has actually been resolved, right? So there are 3 or 4 things that have actually happened here. One is, first of all, we need to access WhatsApp, right? And then connect that, access WhatsApp and connect that to, how do you say, Teams. So in order for that to happen, we need somebody in the middle. So Twilio is a broker who actually provides us that access through an API. So we'll talk about that. How do we get on Twilio? If you guys want to get, how do you say, a trial account, what do we do, so on and so forth. So we get that, URL basically. So from there, we actually head on over to the team side where we look at the adaptive cards. We'll walk you through that scenario as to how to, access that URL from Twilio into your teams. We can do that through a particular flow. And then from there, there is this integration between the adaptive cards and, how do you say, your Power App. So that integration as well as through Flow. So we'll actually see that from your Teams, then back into your WhatsApp, again, using that, URL that Twilio has actually provided us with. We'll actually unpack that as well. So we'll go through the, entire 360. And I think this is the overall scenario that we'll like to spend the next maybe hour or so talking about, okay? Mohammed, do you want to then talk a little bit about the architecture? I mean, I briefly mentioned it. Kindly go over the architecture. I suppose we have one little diagram to show people that,
Yeah, sure, sir. Can is my screen visible still, Sanjay? I just want to confirm it.
Yeah, we can see the
Okay.
screen.
Yeah. Okay. So here, whatever Sanjeev just talked about, so the user messaged WhatsApp, a WhatsApp number, a customer care WhatsApp number, which then calls Twilio. So the Twilio is like a broker between the Microsoft 365 platform and WhatsApp. So they are called as business solution provider. Right, I'm going to talk about Twilio more on the next slide. So the Twilio receives the message, and it's going to call an API endpoint, which is from the Power Automate. I'm going to deep dive on that, but this is how it works. Whenever there is a message from a user, it's called a Power Automate API, and then that particular Power Automate is responsible for uh, parsing the API and getting the required information. For example, whenever a user messages WhatsApp, they will have a WhatsApp profile name, and they will have a WhatsApp number, and also whatever the message. We are going to parse that, parse those required information, and put that on a SharePoint list. And after that, we're also going to be creating an adaptive card, whatever we have shown that we have shown previously on our demo, the card which you have seen. So that we are going to be creating it, and that gets posted on the Microsoft Teams. And we also have there a button. So the view case button, if you could remember. So that button, on click of that, it takes to the Power Apps. I'm going to talk more deeply after this, but that is how it is done. We have deep linked a particular item in a SharePoint list, so that that particular item's information, which is actually the user's problem or the issue, which is shown on the Power App. And after the technician resolves the case, and we have sent a message right from Power Apps to WhatsApp. So we are calling an API which is given by Twilio to send that WhatsApp message to the user. So this is the overall architecture. On a very high level, we will dive down the line on each of the individual components. Over to you, Sanjeev.
Supermo, let's actually get right into it. So, let us talk about Twilio, right?
Yeah, yeah,
As to
sure.
how to, what does the service actually do? How to actually subscribe maybe like we did, get a trial account so folks can actually do the same, if they want to. So folks can actually get an account as well. And a little couple more details on it. Go ahead, Mo.
Absolutely. Okay. So, WhatsApp has got there are three types of WhatsApp accounts. One is the consumer app, which we all use, right? So, which is, and it is no money. And next one is, there is a concept called as, or a plan called a small business app, right? So, and the messages are actually charged. Right? So it is not free, and there is other one which is for enterprise scale application, which has got an API. So whatever we have used right now is the business API, right? So which for if you subscribe to this, you get an API with the passwords and account details, this OAuth and everything. You get that, and with that we'd be able to send WhatsApp message from whatever application. And we have chosen Power Automate, but it can be done in many other ways. And if you want to use C Sharp, or if you want to use a Node, a JavaScript, and whatever it is, and you'll be able to use it. So how to get this API? And there are actually two ways to get a business API. The first prerequisite is, if you want to get a business API, the business first of all has to be registered, right? And it can be whatever number you would like to treat that as a business number. The business has to be registered, and the Facebook, they have got a process to do it. You'll have to upload few documents, right? So and your something related to your business, and once that is approved, there are actually two ways to use the API, to get the API. One is a business service provider. Twilio is one of the business solution provider. Twilio is one of them, and the other one is direct integration. Right. So this particular integration right now, it is not available for new customers. So what that actually means is, you have to install the client which takes care of receiving the messages and also takes care of sending the messages, everything you'll have to take care. And this is now right now not supported for the new customers. So the only option to go is using the business solution provider, and they will host the code. They will give you an API endpoint. What we have to just do is to consume those API endpoint. They will give you the username and password for you to call that API. They will take care of everything, right? And also, whenever there is a message received to your business number, what's a business number, and they will take care of notifying us by calling an API. I'm just going to show that, right? So because if you want to use Twilio for WhatsApp, right, there is this business verification needs to be done for your WhatsApp for business number, but there is other way around as well. They have a concept called as Twilio Sandbox, right? So you can use that Twilio Sandbox. You will have a number, right? They will give your business number, right? So that is what we have used. Right, so I'm going to show that. And also there is a trial plan which you can use. They don't ask your credit card. If you want to sign up for the trial, do it, and also you get a credit of $15, right, per sign up, and no credit card information is required. So if you sign up for that Twilio trial, you get $15, and you'd be able to use this Twilio sandbox, and you can just do whatever we have did. Yeah. So this is about the business API and
Yeah,
Twilio.
and folks, just to add, right? I mean, if some of you have actually been working with Dynamics 365, you know this already. Otherwise, I'm gonna actually we'll actually post a link as well, for you guys to, how do you say, look at even from the D365 standpoint, because you can do the same thing from customer service there, be it either, WhatsApp or Twitter. There is an integration actually in, and it works much the same way. Okay, back to you, Mohammed.
Yeah, sure. So what I'm going to do now is to show you the flow, which is actually responsible of posting this adaptive card whenever a user reports a problem, right? So I'm just going to quickly go to a different interface to show you the flow. So okay, so maybe before that, I will show you the adaptive card designer. So we will share all of these URL after we complete this call, and I will also be we will also be sharing the deck with you all. So you have all of these URLs and the Twilio links, etc. Right, for you to sign up. So this is the adaptive card designer, right? So it is open to everyone. What or just go to Google and then type in the designer. So you get this basic or the default card, right? So you can start with the default one, or you can select a new card. And when you click on this new card, you get options to select from already existing templates. So based on however you want the card to look like, select something, right? So I'm going to go with the basic adaptive card, right? Which is this one, right? So this is the card which has got some title and also some information here and some text, right? So here, for example, I wanted to insert something, and you can see here one other information to note here is the host application. So I said the adaptive card is platform agnostic, right? So it can be used in multiple platforms, be it Outlook or Teams. So on this drop down, you get to see this different platform. If you would like to use it for Teams, select this one, and it has got the both dark and light theme as well. If you want to use it in a Cortana bot, select this one. And if you want to use an Outlook, select this one. So I'm going to go with Microsoft Teams, right? The dark mode. So I'll go with the light one. So this is the adaptive card. And if you want to add some more components and you want to customize based on your needs, what I'm going to do is just to add a container somewhere here, right? And then some column set, right? So I wanted, for example, to collect information or display the WhatsApp number or whatever it is, right? So I'm going to put in the text blocks. It is everything is drag and drop, right? So the text block is added, and you want to change the name of it to it WhatsApp number, right? And then here the other column, you can add one more text block, right? The WhatsApp number, it can be dynamic so that you get that from the flow, which I'll be showing it. So once you design the card and however you want it to look like, what all needs to be done is to copy the whole JSON, the card payload editor, copy everything, right? So that is it. And we have our card JSON schema. Now I will show you the flow, which is responsible for uh, receiving the message sent by the customer, right? So I have used a trigger which is called as when an HTTP request is received. I'm going to
So
zoom in a
Mohammed,
little
actually,
bit.
one second, before you
Yeah,
go there,
yeah.
just to kind of, I was just monitoring the chat, and looks like, this Hari has asked a question. for a demo, is there a way to actually set up a business account, or do we actually need a legitimate business to set this up? Right? Do we
Okay,
have
so
to?
yeah, absolutely. I can talk about that. So this is the trial account which I've signed up. So what all needs to be done is twilio.com, right? And once you log in here, what all needs to be done is register, sign up, right? You get an option because I've already signed up. I'm not getting this option, so maybe this one, sign up and start building. Sign up, and then there'll be a trial option. So once you have done that, you get this $15 credit, which like I've just consumed very few cents out of that $15, and that cheap it is, right? So I've sent lots of WhatsApp messages, but still I haven't consumed everything, right? So here, once that is done, and you'll have to
Sorry, to stop you. So
yeah, sure.
essentially, to actually try, Hari, you don't actually need to have like your SEC registered business or something like that. You can actually go in and try, um, you know, um, and the only difference between the trial and the business will actually be just like your Office 365, right? It'll have the feature set, but then beyond that, if you want to do certain things, it won't allow you.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, I mean,
absolutely.
does that answer your question, Hari? I mean, kindly feel free to unmute. You can. I just noticed that. Yeah, and we'll share the links, folks. We'll share the links. We'll share the recording, so you can configure it yourself.
Thanks,
Okay,
Sanjeev.
so yeah, keep going. Most welcome. Most welcome, Hari.
Yeah, it is.
Go ahead, Mo. Yeah.
Hari, it is straightforward, right? So once you log into Twilio, and you will get to this console interface, console.twilio.com, and what all needs to be done is expand this messaging, and then come here to send a WhatsApp message, right? And on here you will, because I've already activated my sandbox. I'm not getting that, but you will have that, right? And click on that activate sandbox, and then you will get this a number to you, right? So which you can use it. So whenever there is a message which you're going to be sending it from a WhatsApp number, and it's going to be from this number, right? So because since you do not have your business verified, you will have to use the sandbox, right? So once this is done, right, and after that, so the flow, because we need a flow, an API which the Twilio will call whenever there is a new message posted to that business number. So this is the flow. I'm just going to walk through this whole flow, and then I'm going to show you how to integrate this in the Twilio console. Right. So this flow, this particular trigger, and after you add this trigger and then some action, and if you save it, you get an API endpoint, which is the post URL, HTTP post URL, and this is anonymous, right? The API endpoint, this one, it is not secure, right? And it needs to be anonymous as well, in order for Twilio to notify you that there is a message, right? So, and here, and maybe before that, I'll just show you a trial run. So we sent a message sometime before to a WhatsApp business number that we have a problem, right? So you can take a look at here the run, right? So after we send that message, and Twilio actually called this particular API, right? And I'm gonna show here.
So the
So
key
why?
basically, sorry, Mohammed, the key
Yeah,
is, what, Mohammed mentioned here is Twilio called the webhook, right? Twilio called it. It's not like this, how do you say, flow is pulling the information, right?
yeah,
Because certain times when you do something like this, this webhook here will actually be like a radar, it'll be looking for information. And then when the message comes in, it takes it in and does whatever it has to do, right?
yeah,
In
yeah,
this
yeah.
case, it is just sitting there, and then the notification is actually pushed into, how do you say, here, right? By
Yeah,
Twilio. So
absolutely.
important distinction, because that can get into some licensing issues. Okay, go ahead, Mohammed. Sorry.
Yes, no problem. Yeah. So whenever there is a new message to a WhatsApp business number, Twilio will call that URL, that API, And on the body, it will have all the necessary details. For example, it has got the message ID, which is not interest to us, right? It has got, for example, the profile name, and what is the profile name of the user. So my profile name is this one, and we need this information, which we have captured it as well. An SMS ID not required. This number, WAID, and this is the WhatsApp number of the customer. So we need this information, right? And one another information is the body, right? So the message, the actual message, and this also will have to capture it, right? So these are the three information which we will be parsing it and get what we actually require, right? And if you look at it, this is actually a JSON. The body is JSON, and what we are all interested in this particular property, which is called as form data, right? And if you look at this form data property, and it has got every other information which we require in the form of key and a value, right? So we'll have to parse this body and get the key and the value only for the profile name, the WhatsApp number, and the actual message, right? So now I will get into the flow so that you get you will understand, right? So what I'm doing is we are initializing some variables, profile name, and then what is the from number, and then the two number, etc. And here, so if you remember the body which I was showing, what we all require is just the form data, right? So that particular property is required. So I am getting that particular property from the body using a function called as trigger body, and then we have form data, right? So I kind of put that, store that on a variable, and after that we will have to parse it, right? So the parse the whole whatever the other values, the key and a value which is stored on the form data, right? So this is actually the content, the form data content, which is like the output of this particular compose action. And after that, this is actually the schema, right? So, and once you have this, and what you all see is key and a value, because if you remember, the form data property just had key and value, right? And after that, we'll have to just loop through, because there were a lot of key and values. We'll have to put an apply to each, right? So it loops through, and then we have is a switch condition, right? So it has it has got around 13 such value properties, key and values, right? So we'll have to loop in, and what we all require is the profile name, and then the from, and then right
The
from,
two,
yeah,
probably.
the two, absolutely,
So,
right?
so,
So
so
these
here's,
three,
yeah, Mohammed, sorry to stop you
yeah,
here.
sure.
Does everybody understand what's going on here? So essentially, we have a, in the message that got sent from Mohammed to me in WhatsApp, there is the body of the message itself, right? Then there is the from number, which is my number. Then there is the to, which is the customer service number. So all of those basically came in through the webhook in a JSON format, right? If Mohammed, if you scroll up, kindly, if you could scroll up a little bit. So you're seeing that as the JSON output, right? And that's actually, like Mohammed said, it's coming in key value pairs, basically. And then for each of those messages, and if someone else has a more elegant way of doing this, kindly, like, unmute and, let us know. This is how we learn. So what we have done here is, or what my good friend Mohammed here has done is, so for each of those blocks of information, be it either the number, the from number, the to number, or the body, he has actually like created a switch statement to capture that, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a loop, right? You're basically capturing it in a loop. Now, if you folks have seen something better, kindly feel free to unmute and then, let us know that, hey, look, there is some other way that is actually more efficient way of doing this than actually, this approach. Because I'm telling you, folks, we learn all the time. If we get a chance to look at that IoT thing, I'll show you. There are so many things that I have actually learned through, community conversations that can actually decrease the cycle time. So as you go through this flow, it barely took like literally a second, not even a second, right, to run through the flow. but there may be certain circumstances where the flow may take a longer amount of time, right? So to me, performance improvement is not with, hey, I've developed this, now I hand it off to the tester to tell me. I do it right here because I don't have with me, professionally, I don't have an army of people, right? We are a small team. So we actually test right there. We see the flow. Oh, the flow is taking like 6 seconds to actually do this. Now, what can we do to crush that 6 seconds to 1 second? You see what I mean? Incrementally, like, what the Japanese do, Kaizen, right? So if you folks have a better idea, kindly, feel free to jump in and say, hey, look, you could do something like this, right? This is our, how do you say, idea. Kindly go ahead, Mohammed. Just wanted to call it out that this is how we grow, together.
Absolutely, absolutely, sir. Yeah, thanks for that. And what we are looking here is switch if it finds the key and right, if it is for profile name and it actually stores in a variable, right? So this is how the values, the required information are captured and stored in a variable. And after that, what we have got is a SharePoint list, and we are creating an item. Right, so this actually helps us to integrate with Powerapps. Right, so we are storing the profile name and we are storing the WhatsApp number and also the message, the actual WhatsApp message. And once this is done, and you would have also noticed there was an acknowledgement sent, right? It means that from this particular flow also sends a message after creating an item in the SharePoint list. So that is the last one, right? So the last action, the HTTP action. So it sends a message to an user with an acknowledgement number. The acknowledgement number is from the SharePoint list. And you can see here we are calling an API, which is from Twilio. Right, so I will also show you how to get this API, and it is from the console, right? The Twilio console, you get this API. So what we are doing here is, Sanjeev, you want to say something?
So actually, Mohammed, if
Yeah.
you go all the way up to your HTTP input, right? I mean, if you go all the way up where it's receiving it, where this one is actually getting the information from would actually be the same API source. If you scroll all the way back down, right? So it is one source. In the first place, we are receiving it. In the second place, we are actually posting the message back, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead, Mohammed. Yeah.
Absolutely. So here, so this is an API endpoint which is just for your account, right? And the content type should be like application URL encoded, right? And that is why we are actually encoding the to number and also the from number and also the message in whatever message we're going to be sending it, right? So if you look at the message, we have stored it on the variable, right? So this is the variable, and we are using a function which is called as encode URA component, which takes care of encoding the WhatsApp number, and also this is the acknowledgement message. Your issue has been acknowledged with the case number, IR hyphen, and whatever we would like to send it, right? So and even this particular message is also encoded, right? So we are using this encode URI component function to encode this particular message, and this is actually the to number and to whom we are sending it, right? So we are like sending it to the same person who sent the message, and we have captured already on this loop, right? The from number, and we are sending it to the same number.
Right.
So,
A couple of things over here,
yeah.
folks. As Mohammed, this is fantastic. The thing is, why do we need to actually encode this, right? We'll look into that as well because, when we said greetings, Mohammed, greetings space Mohammed, when the flow actually receives that information, it puts the space has to be interpreted, right? So basically you need to encode that so that you get proper information. Otherwise you won't actually be able to see the message, right? So that is an example as to why you need to encode. In fact, we'll show you that from the run that we did. Will actually show you that in case you're wondering why you need to encode this. Okay.
Sure.
Along the similar lines, Thiru just asked a question here saying, do we get the access token? So yes, indeed, and we'll show you that later. basically it's much like how you want when you want to connect to, let us say, any of the Azure services like Blob, or if you want like Databricks or whatever. It basically gives you the client secret, right? And then you create an API, gives you the client secret, and then you access through that, right? It's much the same thing. And in this case, and Mohammed will like show you that as well. In this case, we are exposing that, but you can actually hide it with a variable and like not expose it as well. So you could do exactly what you're doing on the Azure side here as well. The concept is the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to you.
So,
Back to you,
sure.
Mohammed.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Yeah. So this particular API is not anonymous, right? Because anybody can't send messages to this API. It is protected. The authentication is basic. I'm just trying to hide the username and the password. So the basic, and you'll have to provide the username and password, which you will be getting it from the Twilio console. Right, so this is actually the acknowledgement, and the other missing part is the adaptive card, right? So we now have the JSON, right? So which I've shown you how to generate them, and now we'll have to post it, right? So I have used one method which is called as I'm going to quickly show that to you. It is called as incoming webhooks, right, on a Teams channel. So, and how to get that URL is the incoming webhook URL. You'll have to go to connectors. From the channel, go to connectors, and then look for if you do not find this incoming webhook, just do a search, and then click on configure. Right, I have already configured it. Right, and that is why one sec, so it is okay. I will configure it from the scratch on a different channel. So go to connectors, and then click on incoming webhook and click on configure. Right, say something, what, or customer care. And if you want to have a logo, have it, right? On this channel which posted the adaptive card, I have uploaded a WhatsApp logo. So we'll just go with the default one and then click on create. Right, and once this is done, you will get a URL, right? Incoming webhook URL. Copy this URL, the whole thing, right? So, and then this URL will be used by us to post this adaptive card, right? So I'm going back to the flow. Here, if you look at this one, this particular HTTP action, which takes care of posting the adaptive card to the general team channel. So this is the URL. Whatever I've shown just some moments ago, this is that URL. You'll have to put it on the URI. And then the headers, it is content type, application JSON, and then the body, right? And this is this one, the card payload editor. Just copy everything and then put it here on the body. And this is anonymous, right? And it is not protected with password or OAuth. It is not. It is anonymous API.
And one other thing, right, folks,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you guys have actually used this webhook, but then if you basically say at the bottom of this, as you're configuring this, at the very bottom of this, there is one thing called as get sample, right? And if you click on that get sample, what it actually does is it allows you to paste your own, how do you say, query, right? So you can paste your query. So you can take it from what Mohammed was showing you on Teams, and you just like dump it here. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
So this is actually the JSON, and what we all need to do is to replace the text blocks with some dynamic parameters. For example, on Teams, right? So we had to show the WhatsApp number, right? So if I go back to the general channel, so if I'm showing the message, this is the actual message from the user, and this is the customer WhatsApp profile name, and this is their phone numbers. These three information we have actually parsed it from the body. Right, so here I'm just putting it as dynamic, right? So what is actually the body, and what is the profile name, right? And what is the from? So that is it. There is one another thing. And if you remember on the adaptive card, we clicked on view case and it automatically took to a Power App, right? So I'm just going to talk sometime later, right? But this is that URL which is taking care of that, right? So here we have this teams.microsoft.com. I will talk in a moment. And what we are actually putting in is the list item ID, right? So on a SharePoint list, we create an item whenever there is a new message to WhatsApp, and that is that ID. I'm going to show you how
So,
that's handled.
right. So,
Yeah,
so folks, as a standard, right, basically when you have your list, right, SharePoint list, as you know, if you go to list settings, you will actually be able to get the SharePoint list ID, and then you can expose it, and then you can use that, and then that as you're configuring your flow. I mean, if you guys have done it, right? When you do an approvals flow, as an example, the dynamic content, you will actually see ID and title as a must field, right? So that's exactly what we're talking about here.
yeah.
Um,
And this is actually the list
yeah,
support request which we have created, which has all the information, whatever it's been shown
right.
on the Power
And
App.
Mohammed, while you're here, if you go to settings really quickly on the top, and then if you go to list settings, because the ID, depending on whether you're working on the SharePoint side, so the ID doesn't typically actually show up. So if you scroll down here, there is all items over there, you see. So if you go to all items and click that, it actually shows you a list of all the columns. And
Yeah.
then you can pick your ID over there and you say, hey, do you want to display this first? That's what I do. I just say, hey, position it as number one in your list. So you can get that ID. And that's the ID that Mohammed has actually posted here in the flow, right?
Absolutely.
Back to you,
Yes.
Mohammed. Hey, but Mo, if you want to, since we are here, you might want to also share the authentication, remember that authentication on the Twilio side where you
Ah,
had, yeah,
failure side.
yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah, yeah.
actually show that as well because there was a question on
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Right. So let me complete this one. So here, this is the action. Um, hearing an echo on the line. Yeah, it is fine. So this is the HTTP action.
Mo, could you unmute? Actually, I think you're on mute.
It got
Okay, you're
muted
back. You're back. Yeah, go ahead.
automatically.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Okay,
Mo.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So this is that adaptive card which is responsible for showing that card on the team, right? So now I'm going to go to the Twilio interface. So we have this URL, right? So the API post URL, the webhook URL, which has to be given on the Twilio interface. Right. So if you come to the Twilio console and you just expand this messaging and here go to settings, right? And once you expand settings, you click on WhatsApp Sandbox Settings, right? So it's taking a while to load. Ah, yeah, finally we got it, right? So if you go to the WhatsApp Sandbox Settings and you have this sandbox configuration, when a message comes in and whatever URL we have here, you'll have to just put in here, right? So and this will take care of the Twilio takes care of calling this API whenever there is a new message posted to a WhatsApp business number. Right, so this is one part of the configuration. There is also one another thing, status callback URL, which we haven't yet used. And this is something like if you want to be notified if an user actually read the WhatsApp message and what is actually the user status and those things. Right? If you like to know, create one another flow and then put that URL here so that you get notified whether the user has read the message and you want to take some action after the user has read, you can do it. Right? I'm not saying that you will have to use just flow. and you can use whatever API. And if you would like to, if you want to use your own Azure function, right, hosted in Azure platform, you can use it. Right, and if you want to use your own, build your own API and store it in an Azure web app, do it, right? So it's up to you to decide what you want to do, right? So this is about the flow, and
Right.
I'll quickly, yeah,
See,
Sanjeev.
Mohammed, sorry, that's a great point, because essentially you could use the logic apps to mimic your flow. The advantage with using logic apps, and Mohammed, I'm sure you have done plenty of those, is you can
Yeah,
actually get into the code itself and then edit the code, because in Power Automate, you won't be able to edit the code. What you see is what you get, right? Whereas on the logic app side, you can edit it, right? So go right ahead, right? Knock
yeah,
yourself
yeah,
out
sure.
from that, standpoint. The only thing I will say, folks, is as Muhammad was talking about, like, the status as an example, right? See, in the Indian tradition, sorry, to talk a little bit about the Indian tradition, there is this god who has got, like, reins of like 4 horses. He's on a chariot and he's actually controlling 4 horses. The philosophical significance of it, it's like your mind and you're controlling your senses, basically. The reason why I mentioned this is, as I work with the team and then different customers, if you don't hold the customers like mind and your in a very elegant way, if you will, and a very graceful way, they will go haywire because all these options are available to you. Oh, yeah, I want to see the status. Then you have to decide whether the performance is going to be there or not. Because every time, if you're actually looking at the status, maybe it'll slow down the application to the point where the end users are going to be unhappy. So all that performance testing, etc., you have to do before you actually, like, how do you say, take that chance. Otherwise, you'll end up in a heap of trouble. I'm sure you guys have been through this as developers. If some of you are developers, I'm sure you have been through this. But if you're end users, kindly also have this in mind, because the feature is all available. Whether you use it or not is where the wisdom is, right? Back to you, Mohammed. Sorry, I just wanted to call
Absolutely.
that
That's
out.
no problem at all, sir. Yeah. So here I'm on the Twilio console again, right? So after I expand messaging and click on this, try it out, and then come to send a WhatsApp message. So if you're for the first time doing this sandbox thing, activate it, and you get this small code which you'll have to do it to activate the sandbox, right? So for example, I have an WhatsApp number which is configured for my local account here. So you'll have to just send this message in order to in order for this WhatsApp number to become part of the sandbox, right? So this is the small message which needs to be sent. And once this is done, it kind of you can see here the message is received, right? So next you'll have just click on it, and on here. Right, so two-way messaging, yeah. So this is where you get the URL for us to post. So this is the URL I've used in Flow, twilio.com accounts. So you get it here. So this is the message which I have used on the flow, which is at the bottom, right? So on this HTTP action acknowledgement. So if you remember, this is the API. And this is how you'll have to get it from the Twilio sandbox. And you also get the password. If you click on this show auth token, you get the password right next here. You can copy that, and this is the username. And whatever I was using it here at the bottom. Okay, this one, the username and the password. This is what I've got it from here. And you can also see here that there are very other ways to do it. And if you want to do this in Java, right? So and you also have a clean implementation on how this can be done. And if you want to do it in C# or Node.js, right? Everything is here. You'll have to just take the code and then do it, configure it. That is it.
Right. And the additional thing over there is that when you have the username and password, you can actually dump it in a variable so that it's
Yeah,
hidden. So you don't actually have to show that.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Right, and moreover, you can if you're using Flow, you can also store it in Azure Key Vault so that it is completely masked and you don't have it. You're not exposing it on the Flow.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So that is it on the Flow part, sir. can I go and talk about the deep linking?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do the deep linking now, right?
Okay, perfect.
But before we do that,
We lost you. Hello, Sanjeev, I'm not able to hear you.
Yeah,
sorry,
yes.
sorry. I went on mute there. So, folks, at this point, if anyone actually has any thoughts on doing this better, if you folks, I'm sure you folks have actually done some like this on the Dynamics 365 side, with omni-channel and so on and so forth. If anybody has any thoughts as to how we could do this better, or if different ideas, we'll give it a couple minutes. Please feel free to unmute and then chime in. I'm sorry, but there is something Mohammed said on adaptive cards. Can you explain that bit? Sure thing, for sure, Mr. Higgins, for sure. Yeah, for sure. But before we get there, anyone else, any thoughts before we move ahead? Any thoughts on how we could improve anything? Going once. Going twice. And sure. So, Mohammed, if you could kindly quickly recurse back and just show them the, the Teams thing, would be very kind. I think it's on the.
Okay. Yeah. So for the adaptive card, first of all, you'll have to design how your card has to look like. And to make that card, there is a web interface, a web URL. You'll have to just hit that URL and click on new card, and then you design the card, right? So you get everything. It is a VCVic editor. You just add containers, and if you want to have a button, do it. For example, I'm going to the Teams dark mode. If you want to add some actions, add it. And once everything is done, once you have designed the card, copy the JSON, right? So you get this card payload editor, copy the whole thing, and then this is the action which is responsible for posting the adaptive card. So you put that JSON on the body. So this particular URI, it is the adaptive card URL, which you will have to get it from the Microsoft Teams, right? So you'll have to go to connectors, and then it is called as incoming webhook. Once you configure them, and once you name it and however you want to name it, right, and then click create, you get that URL. So copy that, copy the whole adaptive card URL, and that is what we are using it here. Right, so this particular URL, and there is also other way to do it. So let me quickly show that as well. You click on add action, right? So adaptive card, look for adaptive card, post an adaptive card in a chat or a channel. So if you go with this particular action, you're not required to configure a Teams incoming webhook connector. It is not required. So just add this action, and then configure, like it actually posts the conversation as a flow bot, and then where you like to post it, so which channel, right? You'll have to configure everything here, and then at the last, once you choose all of these, you'll get an option. So here, right, insert adaptive card JSON, and copy the JSON from the designer and put it here, and then do the other things like the dynamic variables. Yeah. So is my answer clear? If you have more questions, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Yeah, that was fantastic, actually. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Higgins. Samuel has a.
Thank you.
Most welcome, Mr. Higgins.
Okay, sorry, thank you. So basically, this adaptive card, it's a sort of a design, a UI design, a good sort of a nice UI design that you can use in your teams to say if the automate the Power Automate sends information, then you could have a good UI design with different dynamic controls that you can use to respond differently the way you want to that kind of Power Automate and send the information to automate and continue the flow. It's just a question, trying to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I will also, I have already written a blog post about this adaptive card. I will share this on the meeting chat during the end of the meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Otherwise, guys, this is a very good presentation. Thank you so much. It's very
Extremely
helpful.
kind,
Very.
sir.
Thank you so much.
Extremely kind. We also have a question from Mr. Sam Omadadepo. I hope I pronounced his name properly. And he just quickly wants to look at the switch statement. If you could, Mohammed, kindly just show the cases, on the switch. And the best way, Samuel, to test out a switch statement is in SharePoint, just create a couple columns, like one is a choice column. Let us say you say approved, declined, or like, pending or something like that. And then you open up a flow and then you say when an item is created, that's a standard one. And then you go with some kind of an approval flow and then use the switch statement to say approved, rejected, or pending. So it's a very easy way to test it out. Kindly go ahead, Mohammed. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So this is actually the switch statement. So as I said, all of the required information in the body is in the parameter called as form data. Right, so we will have to just parse the required information, which is in the format of key and a value, right? So if you remember, I'll just go back to the run history and show you. Okay, yeah. So look here. So this is the parameter form data, and this particular parameter has got all the information in the form of key and a value. Right, so what we'll have to do is to extract the required information. So what we need here is the profile name, which is in the key, right? And then the value, right? And likewise, we'll have to get this one, WAID, and the value. And how we are getting is using that switch statement. I will now go to the switch statement here. So where apply to each switch. So it actually loops through, right? So apply to each. So for each and every node inside that form data parameter, it loops. For the first time, if it finds profile name, if it doesn't, it goes to this one, right? The default one. And if it actually finds, right, if the key is profile name, for example, look here, if the key is equals profile name, I'm storing that in a variable, right? So that is it. And likewise, we are extracting the other information on the different cases here. And if it is the from number, if the key has got a from, right? And if you look at this case, if the key has got a body, this is actually the message, right? So this is how we are extracting the required information from the body.
Yeah, does that help? I think that is the crux of it, and folks, if you feel that you can get away with using a condition, in condition you actually get an outcome, right? And an outcome can be if the outcome has that number, do something, right? So you could use that as well. But the thing is, it all depends on the performance at the end of the day, whichever is actually gets you the cycle time to be the least, But this in our case is working out plenty fine. We'll actually have to see what it does in the real world, right? Because we haven't done this in the real world. We are like, just having a jam session, like having some fun here, But we'll see. The proof is when you use it in production. We also have another question from Siraj as we are going through this. Does Twilio actually support media files? As an example, if I upload a video of the device, if there is a little issue or something, if I upload a video, as we see it, it can. But a couple things I believe need to happen over there. One is on the team side. I think you actually need Office 365 E5 because it needs to have PSTN conferencing enabled in it, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, okay? So because you're now dealing with media. So that's one thing. The other thing is we haven't tested this. So what I would say, Siraj, is kindly play around with it, right? and then please join the group, and maybe, you know, a month down the line, you can come in and present this scenario, you know, where you've like, you know, done a little bit of like bumming around with like videos, you know, hopefully you have something working, you know, kindly come in and join the fun, you know. So this is how we learn, folk. Okay. Then I think we have one last one from Manuel, is just saying need time to test. Yes. And could be traced on emails for customers. Absolutely. Can also, you know, from there you can send it to Outlook and Teams. I mean, Outlook. Absolutely. You know, endpoints on Microsoft absolutely can, you know. Okay. So back to you, Mo. Go ahead, sir.
Sure, sir. I was just going to show this function which takes care of encoding your component, right?
Excellent.
So you look here, the WhatsApp number is actually encoded. The plus symbol on the WhatsApp, it got encoded, right? So with the %3a, and also the message, right? So whatever message, your issue has been acknowledged, and you can notice here whatever the spaces we had on the message is encoded with a %20. And this is something which needs to be done in order to call this API, because it supports the header, which is X www encoded, right? Because of this header, and that's how they have designed their Twilio API. So you'll have to definitely encode in order to send the message. Yeah. So the last thing is, sir, I will quickly show the deep integration
Yes,
from
go ahead,
Powerapps to
go ahead,
Teams.
please.
Yeah,
Kindly go ahead.
sure. So we have got a Power App, right? So this is actually the Power App. We have designed it from the Maker portal. And once you have done that, what we did is we have added that on the tab, right? So you click on this one and then look for Power Apps, right? So you get this one, right? So you get this and then add the app which you have developed for this scenario. And once that is added, right? So once that is done, and you will go here, go to the tab and copy the link to tab, right? So if I show you the URL and how it looks, mere web. Okay. So I will, yeah. So look here. So this is actually the channel URL. If you, for example, if you just access this on a web, it will directly take you to that particular channel where the Power App is added. And if you look here, the sub entity ID is kind of null, right? It has nothing. And what if you remember in the flow, the sub entity ID had the ID of the SharePoint list item. I'll quickly show that. So post adaptive card. And if you look at the bottom, the URL, the view case, right? So everything, whatever I've just copied, I've just pasted here. The only additional thing is the sub entity ID has the list ID. Right? So this is how the deep integration is done. And if the user clicks on the view case, right, it will automatically take the user to the Power App, right? So I will show you how we are loading that particular list item, right? So if I go to Power App and here on app on start settings, on app on start, so we will actually capture that ID information, right? So and this particular function will help you to do it. It is called as param and then sub entity ID. The sub entity ID is the one, this one where we have passed the SharePoint list item ID. We are capturing that on the on start, right? So where, and we are storing that on a variable which is called as where item, right? So and after then, if the where item, if it is not blank, we are navigating the user to a screen which is called as screen case details, which is this screen, right? And on that screen, maybe Sanjeev, you
Yeah, exactly. You know, but
yeah.
you get the point, right, folks? So
Yeah.
the hook basically here is the SharePoint list ID. Okay, the hook is the SharePoint List ID between your Powerapps and then your, how do you say, HTTP call, right? So that is the hook. So then, if the ID matches, then it actually comes up here and then shows the actual, how do you say, detail of what you have sent from WhatsApp. That's it. As simple as that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on this integration from anybody? Any questions here? Because we talked about getting the URL from your WhatsApp, then you placed it in your flow, and there it asked for the entity ID. We know the entity ID from SharePoint, so we took that because we just created the item one step before. As you created the item, you know which ID that item corresponds to. So you take that, put it into your, how do you say, HTTP action, and then once you get on the Power App side, you basically capture that ID, and then you send it to the right screen over here, right? If the on start you could also say that, hey, you look, if the item is blank, I mean, you're not going to do any action, but then in this case, since you're tying it, they will always be, I'm sure, an ID, and then it'll bring you to the screen and show you the actual case. Okay. Any question on this, folk?
Yeah, I have one question. So in that sub one, can you go to that screen details? That yeah, as support
Yeah.
request is the list item. What is a support request?
Okay, it is the list where all the user information, the message, and whom from the message was received, right? So everything. So this is actually the list we have used. So yeah, so whenever the message is posted on WhatsApp, so we get it in the flow on this webhook, and we kind of create a new item, right, in the list using this action.
Yeah, scroll up there.
This one.
That create items. Yeah, over there.
Yeah.
So basically,
this,
Thiru, you're getting all the key value pairs, right? And that you will have the body, then you will have the number, etc., right? I assume this is actually Thiru from the voice. So you get that in variables, and then you can actually pass it to your how do you say, SharePoint?
Yeah.
Got it, Sanju. But in that Power Apps, how do you want to create a separate connector? Because by default, in that and the functions, he's directly writing support
Correct.
functions. So
correct, you can.
Yeah. So we have actually already created the connector on this Power App. If you could see here, we have a list named as support request.
Okay.
Right. So we already have added it.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Thanks, Ashi.
Yeah.
Super. So keep going.
Sure.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Every single message from WhatsApp will result in a line item. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Keep going, Mohammed.
Yeah. So here, I will go back to this. So we have got a gallery control. Right. So if you look at this gallery control, we are filtering. We are just going to show that particular item for which the user messaged in the issue, right? So this var item is the variable which you have actually captured it from this sub entity ID, and this is how the whole deep linking was possible. Yes, Sanjeev, would you like to talk about the other things here, like assign case and resolve?
This, how do you say, this is fairly straightforward. If you guys have actually been using Power Apps, so basically for every single line item that comes in, you actually need a technician assigned to it. So that component of it, is fairly straightforward. It's not anything incredible. You would have like a master list of all the technicians. And then you can bring that master list over to Power Apps and then select the master list, and then you assign the person. Okay, but that's a separate flow onto itself, and there are many different things that you actually can do there, right? Beyond hey, what if someone's not available? Then you need to be able to assign someone else. All this good stuff is a separate flow onto itself. That management component of it is a separate flow, but that is, how do you say, bread and butter, right? If you're designing field service applications, this you need to know, right? So that component, we'll let it go. This is more on the integration side. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Sure, Sanjeev. Yeah. So here, and if you remember when we had showed the demo, we clicked on a button to send a message from Powerapps to to WhatsApp, right? So your case is resolved. This is something which we have typed in here, and what we have done is, and after the message is typed, we click this button, right? So which is actually calling a flow, another flow. I'll just quickly show that flow. So that is this Power Apps button trigger flow, send WhatsApp message. And this is quite straightforward, right? So what we are doing is to get the information to which number it needs to be sent and what is actually the message. We are getting those two from the Power Apps, and we are passing it from on the button click. You can see here, send WhatsApp message dot run. So this is the flow which we are calling in, and this is the body, and then the message, everything. Right, so this gets called, and here it is straightforward. We are just calling the same API endpoint to post a WhatsApp message or to send a WhatsApp message. Everything is similar. The content type is URL encoder. We are encoding it here, right? It is something similar to what I have already shown on that API, that webhook API flow, the other flow. Yeah, Sanjeev, did we miss something, or
No,
is it all?
I think we have we have covered that component. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, there is somebody who's actually asking about, hey, other than Twilio, is there an alternative? There are alternatives, other brokers. I used to have a list. I can actually send you that link later. There are other brokers who provide it on the Dynamics 365 side with field service. I'm not terribly sure with Power Apps if that is like, what's the scenario, but yes, there are other people, other brokers who do this, but Twilio is by far the most well
Yeah.
known is the point. Okay.
Absolutely. And moreover, there is no direct integration right now possible. So you'll not be able to build your own solution by installing the WhatsApp client and do process all the messages, right? So that is something which is not possible for the new customers. That is what it says in the documentation. But it is not just with Twilio. You can go with any other business solution provider. And I also we also given a list on the references section. For example, if you go to this URL, you'll be able to get different service provider detail based on your location and stuff. And this is something which is
Right,
there on
right,
the
right,
references section.
right.
Yeah.
And then Nico has a question around alternative, which is the same thing as I think Hari's question, basically. So we'll address that as we send you a link. I think Microsoft has got a page where they talk about different providers. So we'll send you that. We have only tested Twilio because that's something that we had seen before. So we welcome you to come in and check others out, and perhaps come in and do a short presentation on it. Would be very kind. So in addition, this can integrate with local telcos? Yes, indeed, would be the easy answer, for the simple reason on the Dynamics 365 field service side, you can, I'm in Singapore, you could actually go with Singtel or StarHub or something like that to actually do that SMS integration in addition to your WhatsApp integration. So that component, I've heard about it. But I'd assume it's the same case elsewhere as well. It should actually allow you, depending on where you live, at least let me put it this way, in the developed components, of the world, I'm sure there is integration. When you get into the emerging markets, it's a case by case, a scenario. Okay, I trust that actually answers your question, Nico. And then there is somebody who's a guest. I'd be very kind if you could identify yourself, sir, because your questions are actually very good. He or she, I don't know who it is basically saying, hey, look, what if the customer decides to chat with how do you say, thinking it's a chatbot, right? So yes, that's definitely possible. However, the moment I actually say something, what happens is I get a note saying your case has been registered. Hang on to your hats because we are going to go do whatever we have to do, or hold on, hold your horses. Basically, is the point, right? So then I'll wait. I mean, if I am reasonable, I'll actually, like, when I get the message, I'll actually wait, and then I'll, like, respond. And every single line item gets created basically as a SharePoint line item, right? Then he also is saying, hey, look, we need to pay WhatsApp, Twilio, and Powerapps. Well, it depends, right? It truly depends. In the case that we are actually using here, you don't need to pay Powerapps because it's integrated with your Office 365, because we are using SharePoint as a data source. It comes with your Office 365. You don't need to pay. Likewise, you don't need to pay for Teams because Teams is part of your Office 365 as well. Twilio, yes, but then you also saw, so Twilio, as you also saw, is, reasonable in pricing, right? So, I won't be, when I look at the overall solution and what I'm trying to accomplish from a user standpoint, that could be definitely be, how do you say, something that could be palatable. Now, on the WhatsApp side, I don't know. Honestly, we don't know. Do you know, how do you say, of a business Facebook? Do you know, Mohammed? I don't know. Honestly, I haven't done that licensing thing, but I would imagine there's some kind of a cost to it. I don't know.
Yeah. So after you get that business verification done with Facebook, and there is no money required to do that, and after that you'll have to just deal with your business solution provider, right? So I have given we have given links here, like how much they charge for the WhatsApp thing, and also to Twilio, they have more services than WhatsApp. And if you wanted to have send a message, or you want to do a call from your application, you can do it from using the Twilio services. It is more rich. You can have like an omni-channel experience built using the Twilio services. Yeah.
So exactly, and it'd be very kind, whoever the guest is, if you could unmute and let us know of your name, because it feels really weird, like, calling you a guest. But the point is that you have to look at what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day, right? Because you cannot go with just a point solution and say, hey, my database is costing so much. We have to look at the TCO. TCO is a broad word. You have to look at the business value and go with it. Okay. So yes, indeed, Mr. Yusuf, yes, indeed, this will be shared. In fact, we'll be sharing the entire recording as well. Okay. So Mohammed, kindly go ahead. I think we are in the interest of time. I believe we have 15 more minutes or less, so let us actually, very interesting and well presented. Most welcome, Craig. Extremely kind of you. Extremely kind of you. Kindly join us, with our user group. Kindly join us. We would love to get you as well, presenting to us with different scenarios. Some great thoughts coming through in the chat. I mean, so much of learning. Go ahead, Mohammed. So why don't we get to the we were on WhatsApp, right? And we were talking about the last component of it, I suppose,
Absolutely, right. So this is actually the flow which takes care of sending the message from the Powerapps, right? So as I've already talked about, it is quite simple flow. We are taking the required parameters from the Powerapps interface through this button, through this trigger, right? And then we are posting a message using the HTTP action, right? So that is it. And I've also seen one another question, like, can we use it in a bot, like doing I do want to do it on a bot, and then the user receives it, right? You can also have those kind of thing built. It can be easily built using Power App or Virtual Agent, and or Azure bot. And also, if you wanted to build your own bot engine, you can also leverage Azure Signal service to build a chat bot.
Right. So, again, folks, it all depends on how the access to resources is what I would say, from a small business owner. I'm a small business owner, right? And then when I talk to people who are like me, who are small business owners, like a condo management agency, they don't have a massive IT team sitting behind them, right? So then they may not have the wherewithal to go get all these services. In those scenarios, something like this is very palatable, because from Office 365, they can get their Teams, they can get their, E3, let us say, right? Office 365 E3, they get their Teams, they get their, how do you say, Powerapps. And then through this one over here, basically all we are doing is, if you go back to the Powerapps for a second, Mohammed. So all we are basically doing here is we've got a message box. You see that text input is just a label, right? So we are taking the message from there and literally running a flow for that particular line item. You see, for that particular line item, we are filtering the data source, getting the case number equal to whatever that value is, right? And then we are basically passing the text over. Once we take that text for that particular line item, then we go over to the flow, and then as Mohammed was showing earlier, where we picked the information from WhatsApp through the JSON into our SharePoint and then into the HTTP action, much the same way you're doing the reverse of it. Now we are picking the information from the text input over here, and then sending it directly over to WhatsApp. The button on top, the tick mark on top as an example, all it basically does is that it puts the approval back. If you click on the tick on top, Mohammed, for a second, the one on top of the green tick mark, that goes on top of, if you click on the button on top, all this basically does is it patches the information, which is the case that is saying resolved, right? It sends it back to SharePoint so that the manager at the end of the day will actually be able to see in a gallery, like, what is the status? Is it resolved, unresolved, it is pending, whatever it is, right? So you can, right now we just have 2 buttons over here, but in the real scenario, you can have a few more things going on. And then if the person wants to come back in and edit the status, you can bring it back through a gallery into a form and then allow the manager to edit. So many different things can be done, but all those things are part of what you would do in field service anyway, right? I mean, those are bread and butter for people who are in the business application space. That is bread and butter. This one is actually where you do the integration with something that is, how do you say, most users across the world actually do on WhatsApp, right? So this is how we do the 360, basically, right? Send the message back into the end user. Okay. Mohammed, do you want to add anything else in this one?
Yeah. So there were some questions if there is a documentation for the whole scenario, whatever we've explained. So as of now, no. But Sanjeev, I'm planning to write something in the future.
A blog, right? Yeah.
A blog.
So Javier, what we'll do is we're uploading this entire, what do you call, session, and as you saw, we have literally gone through the code as well. My brotherly, how do you say, guidance is kindly look at that and then do your own thing, honestly. The reason is when you actually do the coding, and that's how I've learned it. I don't actually cut and paste. I do it myself. I make mistakes, and then I kind of learn. It would be very kind if we could do that because it's going to be the entire what do you call this? The recording is going to be available to you, right? And then we'll try our level best to maybe parse it out into different components and do a blog on it. By the way, Mohammed, his blogs are outstanding, man. I mean, I'm a bit lazy, but then his blogs are just simply outstanding. You go step by step by step, and you can blindly follow it and go through. Okay. So, folks, with this. Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So with this, folk, what we'll do is we have come to kind of the conclusion of this. So 1 second. Sorry for reposting earlier message. What are the current supported authentication methods while Twilio calls are made, right? So Mohammed, if you want, kindly jump in over.
Sure. Yeah. So it has to be anonymous, right? The URL which the Twilio calls whenever there is a new message received, it has to be anonymous, and it doesn't support an OAuth authentication. No, it has to be anonymous. And if I go back to the Twilio console here, and the settings, go to Sandbox setting. This is just for the Sandbox, and if you have a business WhatsApp a business account verified, then the interface quite changes, but they have clearly documented where you'll have to do those configurations, right? So this particular URL, whenever there is a new message, and it has to be anonymous, the API has to be anonymous in order to make it work.
Sorry, Mohammed, just a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
So let's say if we have anonymous, so what are the possible ways to secure this? So no one exploits this in the future when a message comes in.
Okay. Maybe we have this flow, right? So if I go back to the other flow, okay, so this flow is anonymous, right? So here maybe you can have some validation after you've received after the request is received. Once you get the body, and you see if that request is from WhatsApp, right? So from the WhatsApp provider. If not, just reject it, right? And don't go through all of these steps. And there are some blogs which there is already in there, and they have written like how to secure this call in Power Automate or Logic Apps, right? And if you have to write your own API like in Azure Functions, you can do it the same kind of mod.
Yeah, exactly, Mohammed. One thing, Hari, and you might want to try this out, I suppose, and come in and present, kindly come in and present as well in another session is, I don't know if we can actually create an app in Azure, you get that app registration, right, which gives you your client secret and all that. So I don't know if you can add that as a layer between when you receive the HTTP and then when you actually want to parse the message. You see, in between whether you want to add a layer, you could do that as well, because once you get into the Azure side, I can add point to add custom authentication exactly in request header. That's another great point. You see, what Thiru is saying is that you can add a authentication point as you're getting the request header, and that could be your how do you say application. Okay. What we could do is perhaps we'll take this as an action, and then we'll in the community, this is a community, right? So we can actually investigate something like that and write a quick note on that. Thiru, maybe what we could do is we could talk offline, and maybe you could do a blog on this. Okay. Okay.
Sure, Sanjay. Yeah, because we got one scenario similar like that when we developed the model. So that model we first exposed as a public, then we added the request header to handle that authorization and as well as authentication. So any kind of anonymous request we can inject with that request header, so that like before we parse any data or getting the data, we can validate the request header. So that's the first checkpoint we can do.
Lovely. Hari, does that give you some ideas?
Yep. Yes.
Wonderful, sir. I mean, we'll probably do a session on that, and yeah, but we'll integrate that with a broader thing, because that will be one component of a solution. Okay. Let me just see. Nikhil here. Nikhil Singh is asking, will calling a Power Automate from Powerapps UI require a Powerapps license? So not necessarily, Nikhil. So if you have Office 365 and if you're using SharePoint as a data source as an example, you don't need a separate, how do you say, license either for Powerapps or for Power Automate, because it comes packaged in. However, depending on the scenario, if you're doing a big, huge enterprise scenario, then your database may not be a good idea to go with SharePoint as a data source. Like right now, we are doing applications for a manufacturing entity, which is worldwide, right? And then it's across plants across the globe, right? So we decided to go with SQL Azure, right? Because it's a proper transactional database. You'll run into issues on delegation, creating views, things of that nature, which are not part of this discussion, but you'll run into those issues when you use SharePoint. But if it's a small enough application, by all means, it'll be free. If you use either SQL or what is called as Dataverse, then you need to go with the per user or per app license, which, by the way, as Microsoft has half the price of what it used to be. And if you're a part of a larger enterprise, it's going to be like literally $2-3 for that. It's per month per user, so it's going to be very affordable. Okay. Let me just see, are there any other messages over here? Excited to connect. Wonderful, Ms. Lakshmi, thank you very much. Mrs. Svesh is saying, good session. And then documentation from Javier, which we talked about, right? So folks, what we'll do is let us actually flash the QR code again for the user group, Mohammed. And folks, for us, the differentiating factor for us are two things, okay, are basically two things. One is we want to do scenarios that are unusual, okay? Like this one, out of the blue, you come up with something that is unusual. That is more for the IT person, right? Where integration with IoT from Powerapps, that's something we'll cover off. We missed that today because this itself is such a deep discussion. Maybe we'll come back and do something along those lines the next time or the time after. That's one thing. Now, for the end user, I'm sure there are many end users for us, and if you have, kindly invite your end users as well. For them, they will not have actually seen all these scenarios. And when we talk about webhooks and things, it may not mean anything much to them. However, if they're using paper processes, right, paper-based processes, when you show something like this to them, it really expands their mind. I've been an end user. I was in automotive engineering. I wish I had something like this as a headed application because you could do wonders with it. You could really, if you look at some of the blogs that I have on my LinkedIn, you will see Bernoulli's equation, fast Fourier transforms, all this good stuff that you can actually do with Microsoft technology that nobody tells you. And I had nobody in IT to go to, right? I didn't have a Mohammed as a friend. If I had Mohammed as a friend, I would not allow him to sleep or eat, right? I'd be sitting next to me doing all kinds of fancy stuff, right? That's the promise from an end user standpoint. So if it is simple, it's meaningful to end users. If it's like, fancy integration scenarios like what we did today, it is something for you folk. That's the promise of user delight. It could be IT user, it could be a regular non-IT user. Our focus is user delight. Our focus here is not to claim that we are MVPs or MCTs, and none of that things actually mean anything really to us, because at the end of the day, we are just helping people, right? So kindly come in, join. So many great ideas over here. Mr. Yusuf is saying, hey, wish I had known some of these things would be exactly, Mr. Yusuf, right? So kindly come in, present your stuff. We all learn, and that's the long and short of it. Mohammed, do you want to say a couple of words before we break?
Nothing more, sir. I think I've seen a lot of good feedbacks. I'm very happy to see such things, right? So it is great doing this session, and we'll have to do this often as well, right? And also other people come and talk about something which I've done exciting, right? So that'll be more fun.
Precisely, precisely.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. So we'll flash this for a couple more seconds. Kindly do join, and then how do you say? It's just having fun. Sky's the limit. So with this, we have a wonderful rest of the evening with family, and a great rest of the weekend. Thank you so very much, folk. Most welcome, Hari. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and as we said, we'll be posting the recording, online. Okay.
Yeah, and it'll post it on the group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very kind, Nico. Yeah. Thanks, folk. Yeah. Most welcome, Craig. Yeah. Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Sanjeev and Ashik.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Thank you.